Michael and Lauren Reeves were the sort of couple others admired from afar. Their lives unfolded like a carefully curated social media feed. Flawless smiles, anniversary trips to the coast, and charming holiday cards showing off their golden retriever, Milo, in a Santa hat. They lived in a tidy two-story home on Hawthorne Drive, nestled in a quiet cul-de-sac in Omaha, Nebraska. It was the kind of neighborhood where people left their doors unlocked, and kids rode their bikes without fear. To the outside world, the Reeveses were living the American dream. Michael, 38, was a senior software engineer with a reputation for precision and professionalism. He worked for a local tech firm and often brought his laptop to coffee shops, where he'd code in silence for hours. He was quiet, meticulous, and punctual. Some called him robotic, though he took that as a compliment. He rarely raised his voice, never drank more than a beer, and kept his lawn trimmed to perfection. On weekends, he built furniture in the garage and coached a local youth robotics team. Lauren, 34, was his opposite in many ways. A high school art teacher with paint always on her fingers and a story on her lips. She brought light into every room she entered. Her students adored her for her compassion, and her colleagues leaned on her for her calm in chaotic moments. She taught not just art, but empathy, holding space for the troubled teens who wandered into her classroom, needing more than just paint and canvas. They had met in 2013 at a friend's wedding. Lauren in a coral bridesmaid dress, Michael standing awkwardly near the bar. A conversation over music turned into dinner, and dinner turned into a whirlwind courtship. They married less than a year later, holding hands under a canopy of oak trees while friends cheered. For years, their relationship seemed strong. They were that couple. The ones who never fought in public, who always RSVP'd early, who brought gifts that showed thought. But every perfect frame can hide imperfections. Behind closed doors, their dynamic was more complicated. Michael's reserved nature sometimes veered into control. He kept track of finances meticulously, reviewing Lauren's spending and questioning her Amazon purchases. He disliked how much time she spent at school after hours or with her coworkers on weekends. Lauren, for her part, began to feel stifled. The same man who had once listened to her stories now responded with silence or subtle condescension. The arguments started small, disagreements about dinner plans or her reluctance to join him at tech networking events. But over time, the issues grew. Michael suspected Lauren was too close to a fellow teacher, a younger man named Jordan. He'd seen texts, nothing overtly romantic, but friendly enough to fuel his insecurities. Lauren, increasingly frustrated with Michael's need for control, stopped explaining herself. The warmth between them cooled. By 2022, they were more roommates than spouses. They occupied the same house but lived separate lives. They ate at different times, slept at opposite ends of the bed, and spent weekends apart. Michael dove deeper into his work. Lauren poured herself into her students and after-school art projects. Milo, their dog, became the only common ground. Neighbors began to notice. The smiles faded. The house that once hosted barbecues now kept its blinds drawn. There were muffled arguments, slammed doors, and Lauren's car parked outside overnight more often than before. Still, no one imagined violence. They were, after all, the Reeveses, the picture-perfect couple. Until the morning when everything changed. It was still dark when the 911 call came in. At 6:42 a.m. on March 7, 2023, a man's voice rang through the emergency dispatch line. Low, shaking, and nearly inaudible. My wife. I shot her. I didn't mean to. She came at me. I had no choice. Please send someone. The dispatcher, trained for panic and chaos, calmly extracted the address, 4260 Hawthorne Drive, and dispatched Omaha PD units and an ambulance. The line stayed open. Michael Reeves was breathing heavily, barely speaking. At one point, he whispered, "She's not moving. Oh God, she's not breathing." When officers arrived 7 minutes later, Michael was standing at the front door barefoot, still in his flannel pajama pants and a blood-stained white t-shirt. His face was pale, his eyes red and puffy. In his right hand he held a cell phone. In his left, a Beretta PX-4 handgun, dangling limply by his side. He offered it without being asked. "I'm the one who called," he said softly. "She's inside." Lauren's body was found on the living room floor near the fireplace, face up. A single gunshot wound to the chest. No signs of life. Blood had pooled on the wooden floor beneath her and soaked into the hem of her robe. The room was quiet, still no signs of a struggle. A shattered coffee mug lay near the couch. A chair was overturned. But otherwise, nothing about the room suggested a deadly altercation. Paramedics declared Lauren Reeves, 34, dead at the scene at 6:59 a.m. Michael was handcuffed and placed into the back of a patrol car, not under arrest but for officer safety. His statements were inconsistent. He said they had argued. He said she had thrown something at him, that she was hysterical, out of control, and had lunged at him in rage. He said he feared for his life. "I thought she was going to hurt me," he repeated. "She told me she hated me. I didn't even know her anymore." Inside the house, officers began their preliminary walkthrough. There were no signs of forced entry, no weapons near Lauren's body, no cuts or bruises on Michael. The house was in order, no trashed furniture or overturned lamps. But something else caught an officer's eye. A small, dome-shaped security camera mounted above the TV, partially hidden in a row of decorative books. It wasn't unusual for homes to have indoor security, but this one was angled directly toward the living room, exactly where Lauren had fallen. The camera's small red light was blinking. The responding officer made a note, unplugged the device, and bagged it as evidence. At the precinct, Michael remained calm, eerily so. He waived his right to a lawyer and gave a full voluntary statement. He repeated that Lauren had become increasingly volatile over the past year, that she yelled constantly, that she was emotionally abusive, that she had threatened divorce. He said they had a final fight that morning. "She said she was done," Michael told detectives. "She said she was leaving and taking everything. She said I'd be alone." I snapped. But the evidence didn't support a story of mutual aggression. There were no defensive wounds on Michael, no bruises, no indication that Lauren had a weapon. And while the overturned chair and shattered mug suggested an argument, they didn't explain the use of deadly force. Still, detectives didn't arrest him, not yet. Not without more. They would wait for the autopsy, the forensic report, and especially the footage from that camera. 3 days later, when that video was retrieved and played, everything changed. The living room was quiet as the video began to play. 3 detectives, a digital forensics technician, and the district attorney sat in the darkened evidence room of the Omaha Police Department. The timestamp on the footage read March 7, 2023, 6:26 and 14 seconds a.m. The quality wasn't cinematic, slightly grainy with a soft hum in the audio, but it was clear enough to see everything. Every word, every movement, every second leading up to the shot that ended Lauren Reeves' life. Michael had no idea the camera had recorded it all. In the video, Lauren entered the frame first, wearing a light robe and slippers, carrying a mug. Her face was calm, tired, but calm. She sat down on the edge of the couch and stared off toward the window. A few seconds later, Michael walked in from the hallway, already agitated. "You're really doing this now?" he snapped. Lauren didn't respond immediately. She looked at him and took a sip of coffee. When she spoke, her tone was firm but not hostile. "I told you last night. I'm not doing this anymore, Michael. So you're just going to leave? After everything?" "Yes," she said. "I've made up my mind." Michael began pacing. His hands gestured frantically as he spoke, accusing her of betrayal, of abandoning their marriage, of making him look like a fool. Lauren didn't yell back. She sat still, trying to keep the conversation from escalating. "Michael, please. I don't want to fight. I just want peace. The words seemed to enrage him. He raised his voice, shouting now, demanding answers. At one point, he leaned in toward her face, and she recoiled. Not dramatically, but enough to suggest discomfort. She stood, placed the mug on the table, and took a step back. I'm going to my sister's, she said quietly. I'll come back for my things when you're not here. Michael's voice dropped. If you walk out that door, you're dead to me. Lauren paused. There was pain in her expression, a final resignation. She reached for her purse on the armrest. And then, with sudden precision, Michael turned away, walked down the hall out of frame, and returned 10 seconds later with a gun in his hand. Lauren didn't scream. She didn't rush him. She raised her hands, palms out, and took one step back. Michael, no. Please, don't. The shot rang out. Lauren collapsed instantly. Michael stood frozen. For 12 seconds, he did not move. Then he walked to the couch, placed the gun down on the cushion, and dropped to his knees beside her. Lauren, baby? He began sobbing. Then, fumbling for his phone, he called 911. When the video ended, no one in the room spoke for a long time. There had been no signs of attack. No visible aggression from Lauren. No struggle. No threats. Just a quiet woman trying to leave, and a man who couldn't let her go. The evidence was not just damning. It was definitive. Within an hour, Michael Reeves was placed under arrest for second-degree murder. Prosecutors knew the footage would define the case, but they also knew they'd face resistance. Michael had no prior criminal history. He was respected, employed, seemingly rational. And the charge, second-degree murder, meant they'd have to prove the killing wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, but an act driven by anger and intent. What gave them strength was the camera. An unblinking, impartial witness that told the truth Michael tried to bury under his own story. The court date was set. The jury was chosen. And the courtroom would soon become the stage where justice and denial would go head-to-head. The trial of Michael Reeves began on a brisk morning in November 2023 at the Douglas County Courthouse in Omaha, Nebraska. The courtroom was filled with spectators, family members, reporters, activists, and silent onlookers who had followed the case in the headlines. At the center of it all sat Michael, wearing a gray suit and a haunted expression, flanked by his defense attorneys. To the jury, he looked like a grieving husband. But to the prosecution, he was something else entirely. A man who had executed his wife because he could not control her decision to leave. The prosecution's opening salvo. Assistant District Attorney Rachel Morgan opened for the state. Her voice was calm, firm, and deliberate. She didn't begin with drama or speculation. She began with facts. On the morning of March 7th, Michael Reeves shot and killed his wife, Lauren Reeves, in their living room. He claimed it was an accident. He claimed she was violent. But the camera he forgot about, that tells a different story. That camera shows the truth. She told the jury they would see that footage for themselves. She promised that the evidence would not just prove Michael's guilt, but also strip away the lies he built in the minutes and days following Lauren's death. This wasn't self-defense. It was ego. It was rage. It was the cold, deliberate reaction of a man who could not bear to be left. The defense's counter. Michael's lead attorney, Daniel Roth, approached the jury with a very different tone. He painted a picture of a broken marriage filled with mutual emotional wounds, mental health struggles, and a man at his breaking point. What you'll see is not a monster. You'll see a human being. A man who was exhausted, devastated, and pushed beyond reason by a collapsing life and a crumbling relationship. He claimed Michael had no intention of killing Lauren, that he retrieved the gun in a moment of misguided desperation, not to shoot, but to stop her from leaving, that it discharged during a chaotic confrontation, a tragic accident fueled by years of marital turmoil. The law distinguishes between murder and tragedy, Roth said. And this case, heartbreaking as it is the latter. The evidence on trial. Over the course of the next week, The prosecution called witnesses, officers who responded to the scene, paramedics, forensic analysts, and Lauren's friends and family. They spoke of Lauren's growing fears in the weeks before her death, her confessions of emotional abuse, and her quiet plans to leave for good. Then came the moment the courtroom had been bracing for, the video. The lights dimmed, the screen flickered, and the footage played. Some jurors wept. A few covered their mouths in shock. There was no shouting in the room, no gasps, just the heavy silence of truth laid bare. Lauren's sister, Rachel, who had been seated in the front row, buried her face in her hands and quietly sobbed. Michael, seated just feet away from the screen, could not watch. He lowered his head as his own actions played back in front of 12 strangers who now held his fate. The defense was shaken but not defeated. They pivoted hard toward emotion and psychology. They brought in experts who spoke of Michael's deteriorating mental health, his anxiety, depression, and intense fear of abandonment. They painted a picture of a man cornered in his own life. They called Michael to the stand. Michael's testimony. In a shaky voice, Michael described the disintegration of his marriage. He spoke of Lauren's coldness, of feeling like a ghost in his own home. He claimed that on the morning of the shooting, he thought she might become violent, that he felt threatened. And yes, he retrieved the gun. But not to kill, he said, to scare her into staying, into listening. I didn't want to hurt her, he insisted. I loved her. God help me, I loved her. The prosecution grilled him during cross-examination. They asked him why he brought a loaded weapon to a conversation, why he didn't walk away, why, if Lauren had been violent, she had no injuries, no weapon, no raised voice on the tape. You weren't afraid, A.D.A. Morgan pressed. You were angry, and you wanted to be in control. Michael didn't answer. The jury's challenge. After nearly 3 weeks of testimony, closing arguments were delivered. The prosecution reiterated their theme: control, rage, and the fatal consequence of entitlement. The defense begged the jury to consider mercy, to see the act as a breakdown, not a premeditated killing. The jury deliberated for just over 6 hours. Their verdict: guilty, but not of first-degree murder. Instead, guilty of second-degree manslaughter with a firearm enhancement. The judge sentenced Michael Reeves to 10 years in state prison, the maximum for the charge under Nebraska law. She paused, then added, "No sentence I issue can match the gravity of what you've done." Lauren Reeves lost her life. Her family lost their heart. And the community lost a woman who should still be here. The gavel struck. The sentence was official. Aftermath of the verdict. Michael was escorted out of the courtroom in silence. He didn't look back. His family didn't follow him. Outside, Rachel spoke briefly to the media. 10 years is a legal punishment. It's not justice, but it's something. And we'll take that something and continue to tell Lauren's story so no one forgets her. In the weeks that followed, Lauren's story sparked renewed conversations across Nebraska about domestic violence laws, firearm access, and the importance of early intervention. Advocacy groups cited her case when pushing for reform. Her name became a rallying cry, not because she was a martyr, but because she had tried to survive. And in the end, the video that Michael never meant for anyone to see ensured that her voice, silenced by a bullet, was finally heard by the world. In the months that followed the sentencing of Michael Reeves, the world slowly moved on. But for Lauren's family, friends, and those who followed her tragic story, the wounds remained open. The courtroom drama was over, the cameras were gone, and the media turned its attention elsewhere. But for those closest to Lauren, life would never return to what it was before that violent March morning. Lauren's legacy through the eyes of loved ones. Rachel Morrison, Lauren's sister, took on the mantle of preserving her memory. She quit her job at a local marketing firm and began volunteering full-time with Voices for the Silenced, a domestic violence prevention nonprofit. Within a year, she helped launch a branch in Omaha named Lauren's Light, dedicated to helping women at risk of intimate partner violence. "I couldn't save my sister," Rachel told a packed audience at the center's opening. "But maybe her story can save someone else." She shared Lauren's journals publicly, selected passages that revealed a woman full of self-doubt, pain, but also fierce resilience and hope. One excerpt that struck a chord and went viral online read, "I want to live in a world where I am not small in someone else's story. I want to be the author of my own life, not a footnote in his rage." Lauren had written that just 3 weeks before her death. Public response and community reflection. Across Nebraska, and indeed across the country, Lauren's case became more than a headline. It became a wake-up call. Town halls were held to discuss gaps in domestic violence intervention. Local legislators drafted what would be known as the Reeves Bill, proposing mandatory firearm removal in pending domestic violence cases. Though the bill met resistance, it started a conversation in the state legislature that refused to be silenced. Lauren's alma mater, the University of Nebraska, established an annual Lauren Reeves Memorial Scholarship for students pursuing degrees in social work and criminal justice with a focus on domestic violence prevention. A mural appeared on the side of a downtown Omaha building, Lauren's smiling face surrounded by lilies, her favorite flower. Below her portrait, in bold letters, "She should still be here, Michael behind bars." Inside the walls of the Nebraska State Penitentiary, Michael Reeves faded into obscurity. He was neither a notorious criminal nor a redeemed soul. He worked in the prison library, kept mostly to himself, and was described by inmates and staff alike as quiet, withdrawn, and unremarkable. He received few visitors. His mother came once, early in his sentence, but never returned. Letters from friends stopped coming within the first year. Some believed Michael had finally come to understand what he had done. Others believed he was still trapped in denial. No one truly knew, and in many ways no one truly cared. Lauren's echo. For those who loved Lauren, healing would never mean forgetting. They found her in the scent of her old perfume, the way the light caught on her favorite photo, the sound of her laughter in old voicemails. Her absence became a presence, one that reminded them to be braver, kinder, louder. Rachel would later write in an op-ed for the Omaha World-Herald, "We measure justice in years, but Lauren measured life in moments. Small, beautiful, ordinary moments. The best way to honor her is to fight for those who still have a chance to live theirs."